When I first came to China, I was at the State Department. Some fellow over there says, you know, Ambassador, you know, after a few days visiting a U.S. embassy overseas, I can tell whether the embassy is running the ambassador or the ambassador is running the embassy.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that sent a chill down my spine. I thought, uh-oh, I'm going to be in the category of the ambassador running the agency. So it very much depends on the ambassador. And you have to be aggressive. You have to be aggressive like a lot of things in life. Yeah, otherwise, people will kind of take advantage of you.
Does Washington listen?
Washington will listen if you have good points, if you thought it through. Yes, Washington does listen. Now, next question is, what does Washington do after it listens? Washington tends to respond too much on an ad hoc basis. What's the issue of the day? What's the crisis of the day and so forth? Instead of thinking strategically, instead of developing a plan with the proper vision. So my judgment is, what is our policy, our strategic long-term policy toward China? It may not be perfect, but just at least develop a plan, develop a structure, develop a strategy, because China has a long-term strategy.
What is that China's long-term strategy in your view?
My view of that strategy is for China to keep growing and developing. China, as a rising Asian power, will not too many years from now have an economy that exceeds the size of the United States. So China will therefore be an extremely big player in Asia and in the world, virtually because of its size and because of its, it'd be a military power too. And so China probably is trying to figure out how to manage all that, what it wants to do with all of that. And that the United States has to recognize that and then figure out, okay, that's a reality, that's going to happen, China's going to be big, and let's work with China and help encourage China to work with the United States for the benefit of both countries, rather than just letting it go on autopilot and maybe go off in a direction that doesn't make much sense.
You are well known for being bipartisan when you were serving in the Senate, and you were very instrumental in pushing both parties to do something right. If the new administration, in any way, through any channel, seek your advice about a China strategy, what should be included in it?
I very much hope that President Xi and President Trump, when they meet together in Mar-a-Lago, start to talk more earnestly with each other and develop trust. At the summits I've attended in the past, it's kind of frustrating. It's kind of disappointing from my perspective.
Why is that?
It's so scripted. President Obama, at the private summits, I sit there, I'm at the table, I watch what he says, I hear what President Xi says. They're scripted. Each gives a statement, and each kind of listens to the other, but neither one asks questions of the other. And I would just very much like President Trump to ask some questions of President Xi and vice versa, partly, and stay together because their personalities are so different. You got President Xi is kind of even, he's just very, President Trump is just brilliant, he's effervescent, they get to know each other a little bit better.
Yes, everyone has their personality. Yeah. However, the two countries really have to work together.
Have to, there's no question, there's no choice. It takes work.
The two sides really have to figure out a common ground to work together on so that they will be able to develop mutual trust.
Yeah.
They will be able to get used to one another.
Yeah.
They will be able to eventually know each other's chemistry.
It's more than that. It's also each president has to lead in a very solid way in his own country. For example, if President Trump is governing with tweets, all these Twitter messages, that's going to raise questions of President Xi and of people all around the world. Who is this guy? He's here and he's there. And can you trust this guy?
Do you think people are used to it already or not yet?
Well, I think it's causing a lot of confusion. A president's words count, whether it's by Twitter or whether it's by a press conference or whether it's a statement from the White House, whatever it is, a president's words count because he's the president of the United States. People hang on their words. Same is true with President Xi, and same is true with what the presidents do. Which I'm really trying to say is, in addition to the personal chemistry that has to be worked on, if each country comes across and is solid, that's going to help the trust. For example, what happens when, for example, I hope this doesn't happen, but what happens if suddenly Kim Jong-un does something nutty and stupid up in North Korea, and President Xi's got to get on the phone and call President Trump, or vice versa. If they trust each other in the beginning, then we'll be able to work it out better. But if not, it's going to be a little shaky.
How much do you think it's likely to be the first test of the Trump administration?
I don't think it's the first test. I think it's the most grave and most existential test. I tend to think that Kim Jong-un is going to back off and not go as far as actually pushing the button or doing something nutty and stupid for some time, if at all. So that's why I think it's not first. What I think tends to be earlier is trade relationships between the two countries. Because as you know, Donald Trump, when he was running for office, made a lot of statements with respect to trade in China. And a lot of American companies are pretty upset with some of the practices in China. So I think trades can be one of the earlier ones.
What do you make of this interesting transition you have witnessed about President Trump during the campaign? Extremely rhetorical. However, after coming into the office, after that one China policy debate,
yeah.
he becomes very cautious
yeah.
in any words, action toward
yeah.
China.
Yeah.
What do you make of that transition?
Well, I'm reminded of Deng Xiaoping's statement.
What is it?
Deng Xiaoping's observation was, in America, when presidents run for office, they say one thing. When they serve, they say something else. And they leave office, they say something still different.
So you agree with what Mr. Deng Xiaoping said?
Well, Deng Xiaoping has a point.
Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Secretary Tillerson, when he was visiting Beijing, he used several words in his press statement.
Yeah.
Non-conflict, non-confrontation, mutual respect,
Yeah.
win-win. What do you make of these 4 words used by Secretary Tillerson?
Well, they're the words basically that China uses. China uses often.
You heard those 4 words.
I've heard those words over and over and over and over again. And so at one level, they make sense. But it begs the deeper questions, what's behind the words? Mm-hmm. And for most things, it's deeds, not words. Anybody can say anything. So I was honestly a little surprised when Secretary Tillerson repeated those words, because it really doesn't get to what needs to be focused on. That is some of the differences addressed candidly, both sides.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, in his annual press conference, he said this about Secretary Tillerson. He seems to be a gentleman having the ability to listen.
I think that's right. I know Secretary Tillerson. My earlier job was chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. Secretary Tillerson would often come in to see me on one issue, another tax issue or a trade issue, whatnot.
At the time, he was still with business.
He was still with ExxonMobil. That's exactly right. And I liked him. He's calm. He's listened. And he also thinks strategically and make decisions that would have an effect for that company 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe even 10 years out. Not just making decisions on the moment, reacting ad hocly. And I hope Secretary Tillerson, can bring that sense of strategic thinking to the White House.
You are extremely experienced in terms of how the Capitol Hill usually work with the White House. What do you make of now? The Republican Party really is the dominating party on Capitol Hill. Will they be able to come to consensus as a result?
Presidents come and go.
Yes.
I served with 7 different presidents. The Congress, Republicans including, who do they listen to? Primarily their voters, their people back home. And that's who elect them or unelect them. So the cohesion and working together very much depends upon the president, whether he provides the necessary leadership or not. The stature, the gravitas, if you will, of the president. If President Trump exercises and demonstrates stature and leadership, then he'll be able to lead the Republican Party and the Congress to certain legislative solutions that they're working on. Now, if not, then it's going to be a problem. Because if not, to a large degree, and irrespective of that anyway.
The other thing, of course, is the different opinions in the Senate and the House. The Senate, of course, already you see very different voices regarding the leadership of President Trump. In the House Speaker certainly has a big say.
He does.
And Mr. Paul Ryan is exercising that right now.
In the House of Representatives, the Speaker virtually controls the Republican Party, the majority party. But not totally, because there's a wing, as you know, it's called the Freedom Caucus, which is giving Paul Ryan fits. And the Senate rules are much different than the House rules. An individual senator has a lot more power and control, can go his or her own way compared with a House member.
We've seen that with Mr. McCain, for example.
That's exactly right. And then, but that begs the next question, which is, even though there's a difference, will they get together or not?
Mm-hmm.
Because in the end, if they get together, then something passes. If they don't, it doesn't pass. So that, you know, the differences I think are good because it enables people, enables the country to get a little second look at what may pass the House. It slows it down a little bit. It tends to minimize unintended consequences. And we'll see if it works. I hope so.
Mr. Ambassador, you're not only well-rounded in your own national politics, but also internationally respected. If I could ask you, what do you think of the role your country now is in terms of international institutions and system?
Yeah.
Where do you think the country should aspire to? What would you say?
I think in the world today, the United States still has to provide leadership. The United States is the beacon on the hill. I think a lot of people around the world look to the United States for many of its values. And the United States has provided peace and prosperity since World War II. However, today I'm a little concerned. I'm concerned that the United States is withdrawing a little bit from that role. One is, I believe the United States should pass Trans-Pacific Partnership because that will help raise trade standards in Asia. It'll help show that the United States is present in Asia. We're not going anywhere. And I think that's good for China. I think it's very good for China. It did not happen. And also this talk in the United States about protectionism, tariffs, 45% tariff, border adjustment tax and currency manipulation and travel ban and all that. I think that does not send a good signal for American leadership in the world. I'm concerned.
It's a pity that we haven't seen a new ambassador coming into the office try to handle some of the most important things between the two countries.
I very much hope that Governor Branstad, who's been named, takes over his post very quickly. When he was named, Mel, my wife, and I flew to Iowa to meet with him. We spent about 5 hours, 2 different days, trying to help him out, giving him suggestions and what to do when he comes over here. Because I didn't get much help when I came and arrived first in Beijing. So we wanted to help him. So I hope he comes quickly.
What was he extremely interested in?
Well, it's kind of interesting. He was interested generally in China policy, but his wife spoke more than did he. she was more interested in the logistics, staff and personnel and the car and so forth, because they're bringing a big family over.
That's true.
There are 6 of them altogether, and so she is trying to figure out how to manage all of that.
Mr. Ambassador, once again, what a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tian Wei, very much.
For a straightforward conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You betcha.
Yes.